Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being very patient. We've had some technical problems, as I think you know, so thank you for joining us on our webinar, which is called Are You Prepared for 2023 and Beyond? So we want to try and make this as interactive as possible. So we'd really be grateful for your questions. It's quite a big subject and could cover lots of different aspects of what you're doing now or what you might be doing in the future. I think we all feel we speak to about 250 executive search leaders every month, and the feeling that we're getting from the market is that some kind of dip is predicted because 2021 and 2022 have been the best years ever in the search industry, so it can't always continue being this good. So there's going to be a dip of some kind. How big that dip is and how we all cope with it is something that we can try and discuss now. Just to quickly introduce myself, if you haven't met me before, I'm Tim Connolly. I'm the founder of ALC Enable, which I started back in 2001. And we are the business solutions firm for the executive search industry. So we provide strategic support to search firms, and we help with growth in terms of hiring individuals at all levels, from managing partner level right down to researcher level. And we also provide strategic support in the shape of branding, business strategy, exit strategy, and mergers and acquisitions as well. I'll pass you over to Joe to introduce himself, and then Gray can introduce himself too.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Good morning and good afternoon. Good evening to everyone around the world joining the call. My name is Joe McCool. I've been involved in the business of retained executive search since the late 1990s. I've been an advisor, a recruiter, strategist for retained firms in terms of building their firms with a focus on growth. Look forward to interacting with all of you, and certainly there's a lot to share given the macro dynamics in the world today and what they mean for executive search firms.
Okay, Gray.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, my name is Gray Hollett. I'm a partner with Tim at ALC Enable. My background is really in business and brand strategy development for corporations all over the world. Have spent quite a lot of time consulting with professional services firms over my career, as well as being Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Boyden World Corporation for almost 14 years as well. And the search business is an intriguing business. It's certainly engaged me for a long time, and we're excited to talk about some potential headwinds ahead or not. I mean, we'll see, but certainly the goal is to prepare for the future always.
Thank you, both of you. So I thought I'd just start off by asking the question, maybe to you, Joe, first, if that's okay. What are you hearing from search firm leaders that you're speaking to? I know you speak to a lot as well. What are you hearing in terms of anticipation of a dip or not? And what are your thoughts?
Sure, Tim. I would say, what I'm hearing increasingly is just the question of what are other firms doing? And I would tell you that in the case of my clients and firms I speak to on a regular basis, I would say, for now, it's still a go mentality. Although, it's time, I think, for all of us to acknowledge the increasing observations from market experts, economists, and others who's saying that this unique combination of hopefully post-COVID, but also wartime economic dynamics are certainly raising concern. That's reflected in the stock market. It's reflected in projections about growth. So there's certainly cause for concern. There's some uncertainty. There have been even some dire predictions about this unique combination of factors and how it'll impact the global economy and certainly here in the United States, the U.S. economy. However, I would suggest that there are a few things that search firm owners and managing partners and others should consider in this rising sea of uncertainty. Number one, it's that demand for executive talent remains very high. That's the current situation, and that's very good for all of us. Second is that we've all weathered these business cycle turns in the past. And so I think for those of us who've been around for a while, we can view this uncertainty with a level of confidence that we've tackled this kind of uncertainty in the past. Granted, there are some unique elements to it, but we've been through this before and we can do it again. I would also, on a third point I would share is that a pause or even a slowdown in business, perhaps later this year, might actually be in some ways a positive in terms of allowing a refocus after, as Tim mentioned, a very, very strong period, several years running of strong growth for retained executive search firms. So, demand remaining high, the fact we've been through downturns in the past, if that's what comes, and the notion that it might actually allow a refocus or a reset of our priorities collectively may not be a bad thing.
That last point's kind of interesting, if I could, because it's, everything that all three of us are hearing, and I'm sure everybody on listening here today is experiencing, is just a market like we've never seen before in this business. I mean, everybody is just overextended. They're turning away business because they don't have enough capacity and enough bandwidth within their existing teams. And it's interesting to think, maybe a timeout's not a bad thing, because, to redeploy that talent and focus on some of the fundamentals that were happening pre-COVID. I think, the search firms, and particularly in the retained space, looking for other revenue opportunities to support their business and also to support their client needs, moving into elements of leadership consulting and succession planning and board advisory and those types of ancillary services. But this last market we've just had is like, wow, it's too busy. We can't focus on that, and we've had people say to us, what's interesting is that we've gone from transactional, a business that's transactional, to being far more consultative, but this market has forced us to be transactional again in a way, just so that they can, earn the money while the money's there, I guess, is kind of the crude way to say it, perhaps. But really to take advantage of the time at the moment. And I think what will be interesting, and what the three of us have talked about amongst ourselves, is okay, so if this does slow down, which it has to slow down at some point, we all know that, right? What happens next? What do we do next? How do we protect the franchise? Would be one way to approach it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks, both of you. I think it's interesting what you said, Gray, about firms becoming more transactional. I think that certainly happened, as you say, because of necessity to some degree. I think just more on your plate, so you're having to deliver more quickly. And I've also, I think we've also witnessed that smaller firms are having to differentiate from the larger firms, particularly the Shrek firms, not only through this, but partly through speed and speed of delivery and getting the shortlist to, I've heard of search firms getting the shortlist to their clients in 2 weeks and things like that. So it's an interesting point. I mean, what you said about, Gray, what you said about, it could be a good positive time to take stock of what you're doing. I mean, this is a big question, but what do you think if you had, if you had some time to take stock of what you're doing and how you're doing it, what do you think are the key elements to look at to future-proof yourself for a downturn?
Yeah, I think it's funny. You and I gave a talk 2 weeks ago to a network firm, and we started off the talk with the one question that every search firm asks: how do we differentiate? That's the big challenge, right? Everybody wants to know, how do we differentiate our firm from the firm across the street or down the road, or in the same city. And it's a really good question to ask. And at the end of the day, I think that's probably the most important thing you're going to have to do to protect your franchise, because you have to have that story. Brands are about telling stories, right? And every search firm has a unique and distinct story. You just have to dig deeper and find out really what that is. I mean, is there a way that to have a completely distinct, brand in the marketplace? Some people would say, and I've said in the past as well, that it's impossible to have a pure, defining differentiator in the marketplace, particularly in any consultative business, because it's so replicatable. But I've come to believe that actually that may not be the case, because if you dig deep enough, there is a story to be told by every firm that really focuses on what they're really good at. I mean, we've heard some interesting stories just very recently of, boutique firms fairly consistently winning business from the Shreks and some of the larger networks because of client frustration, right? And why is that, right? And then those smaller boutiques are able to fulfill a complicated, difficult search in a very short period of time, where the larger firms, the Shreks and the network firms, were struggling, and clients are getting frustrated. So then they go to the specialists, the subject matter experts, those boutique firms. And so kind of the reason I'm saying that is because going back, that's part of the story opportunity, right? Digging deep into what it is that nobody else really knows, or at least think they know, and articulating that and using that to drive your business strategy and to drive your brand strategy and your messaging in the market.
Okay, thanks, Gray. I mean, have you got? What are your views on that, Joe? Have you got any sort of additional thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Tim and Gray. Sure. I mean, this is a very interesting time, and I'd like to share just a couple of quick experiences with clients that I think might be telling for where search firm owners and founders and managing partners are in this environment right now. I preface that by saying, we've all been on an incredible run in the search business. It's been very good times for a sustained period of time. However, to get there, to realize record revenue, to realize record profitability, as has been the case for some time in retained search, it's required maximum output. It's required stretching people on our teams to their limits. And so the outputs have been fantastic, but I think it's really time to look at sort of how we've gotten to where we are now. Gains in market share, even some diversification of services beyond retained search has really just stretched teams. But I can share 3 quick client, case studies, if you will, in terms of the market and sort of where these firms are, what they're wrestling with. Hopefully it'll be a bit informing for each of you. First I would say COVID naturally led search firm owners and founders in particular to do some real thinking on an existential basis. We went from dire warnings about COVID, and then ultimately those sort of died down around middle of 2020. People got back to business, and while it's been a real game changer for economies around the world, search firm growth and hiring has continued. Clients still need talent, and it's been a good couple of years despite the challenges of COVID. But in one client's experience, it really forced some thinking about how the founder's life plan and life planning intersected with the future growth intentions of the firm. So really a focus on long-term financial planning for that founder owner, the desire to grow the business, and some of the decisions that were going to have to be made strategically so that the founder's life plan financially would marry with a growth plan, and create some succession options and exit strategy options for the founder. That's one way that this economy has sort of forced some new thinking on the part of a search firm CEO or owner. Second is with a firm for which I've actually recruited several people over the past decade. They reached out to me some months ago and said, Joe, we've had somebody referred into us by a client. We'd like to add them to our firm. Would you do us a favor and just do a courtesy interview with the individual and give us a thumbs up or thumbs down? And thankfully, I interviewed them and gave a thumbs up, thought the person would be a great fit for the client. The person went in, but got themselves on the treadmill of search after search after search. And because the individual was working remotely, they didn't really feel like a part of a team. They just felt like an order taker on the treadmill, getting searches done. But the person actually has now left the firm, citing a lack of cohesion, a lack of team feel. And so I recently was contacted by this firm that let me know the individual left. I immediately recommended or started asking, when's the last time you had everybody together in one room, in one opportunity to engage as a team? And it turns out it was pre-COVID was the answer. So this team actually did a retreat. They took the entire firm away for 4 days in a nice location. And it was a team building exercise because they hadn't done that since pre-COVID. And it was a recognition, I think, that if we don't make this start feeling more like a team, we're just going to continue to be a revenue factory and people might leave. The third piece, just very briefly, was with a client who said, essentially very stark terms, Joe, in the markets we serve, we're one of the best search firms in the world. However, our focus has been on being on one of the best search firms in the world. Operationally, we don't have our stuff together. Future planning, we don't have our stuff together. Branding and differentiation, we don't have it together. So they've been so focused on being a great firm from the outside in, they've really unfortunately neglected the foundational infrastructure building they need internally. So there's been a bit of an epiphany there with that client to say, yeah, we've got to start tending to our own house more and less on just search after search after search.
I think when the market softens, which it will, and it's just a matter whether it's in 3 months or 18 months, I suppose. But that'll be the critical decision and the critical challenge, I think, of pretty much every search firm really is making sure that they have that infrastructure in place to grab market share, to maintain that franchise going into a market downturn. I mean, as you said, Joe, before, we've all been through this before, and we've been through some pretty serious ones. I mean, the 01, which I wasn't around for in the executive search business, was a massive hit in the business, but certainly 08 was a mess for us where I was at. I mean, our revenues went down a huge amount, and it bounced back slowly. I mean, it was interesting. I think it's really fascinating with COVID, same type of hit at the beginning of COVID, but the bounce back was just phenomenal. It was incredible. But that planning for that next cycle, this is the time to be thinking about what do we need to do to maintain viability moving forward, from a business strategy standpoint, from a brand strategy standpoint, from, a team deployment standpoint, infrastructure, technology adoption, technology expansion, technology upgrades. I mean, a lot of my clients and as a brand consultant for years in market downturns, that's where they invested. They invested in infrastructure. They invested in marketing to grab market share. So I think while all fat and happy right now. It's really critically important to start thinking through how are we going to address this when this happens? How do we keep the pipeline going? That type of thing.
Thanks, both of you. So we've had a question in the chat, which I think is a really good one, in terms of how are firms coping with building a culture with the new kind of working from home and sort of hybrid models that are out there. I mean, in my experience, talking to lots of search firm leaders, I think most of them are still feeling their way with it, aren't they? But what's your experience with that, Joe? And what are your recommendations, I suppose, if any, to building that culture, defining that culture, helping search firm leaders and employees kind of build a culture together and manage the, should I be in the office? Should I be working from home? How regimented do you make that? How flexible do you make that? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Joe.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, I would say, we've seen a real change. Many of us will remember the days when a retained search firm had to have significant real estate presence, multiple offices and such. COVID really has accelerated the fragmentation, if you will, of search firm staffing. Retained search firms now have more people working on a fully remote or hybrid model than ever before. So the reduction of that overhead, of course, is certainly a good thing for search firm profitability. As I mentioned, my fear right now, particularly given that just how busy everyone's been, how profitable, how growth oriented everyone has been, is that this allows a level of, I'll say, firm-wide disengagement. And what I mean by that is individual partners might have daily, weekly contact with execution-oriented members of the firm who are working on searches, presenting candidates, interviewing candidates, putting together client project update presentations, these kinds of things. But so I think what's happening now is with the focus on revenue, the focus on growth, the focus on taking advantage of the market opportunities that have been in place now for some time, I would say that firm-wide communication has really dipped. It's really the point of contact for some people is literally just the one or two partners they interact with most often, maybe a research support person or two. So they're really lacking that full firm-wide communication and engagement. And I think that's a vulnerability for retained search firms now. I think managing partners, owners, founders in particular, CEOs of retained search firms really need to consider what they can do additionally to make sure you get everyone on the team engaged on a firm-wide level. And I'd say it's probably the right time, I would say, is probably at least on a quarterly basis to force or introduce that if it doesn't already exist, to make sure that team members are really hearing from everybody across the firm. They're able to contribute in some way to conversations about process or client delivery. So I think it's a dual-edged sword. There's more freedom for search professionals for sure, but at the expense of potentially putting some distance between them and the interests of the firm as a whole.
Yeah, thanks. And it's certainly, I guess, from a talent acquisition, from sort of hiring partners and delivery people, it's certainly opening that up in a very sort of talent short market, in that some of our clients are looking to hire virtually anywhere with the kind of the kind of emphasis on virtually. But what are your thoughts, Gray, about culture relating to working from home and working from the office and hybrid models and how you see the future?
I think, I think the future is here. Industries have been pushing for a number of years about, moving into distributed remote environments, right? And, taking the overhead out of the equation. And it's harder, I think, in professional services and certainly in search. I mean, we're all social beings, and it's great to be around the coffee maker chatting in the morning or at lunch or whatever that is. But that this model is here to stay. I mean, yeah, you might be in the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week or that kind of thing. Is, of course, depending on what's going on with various spikes in COVID. But the interesting thing to me, I think, are some organizations. I haven't seen it in search, but some organizations are spending a lot of time just on socialization activities through Zoom environments as well. But there's so many other platforms for collaboration and partnering, in the electronic world. I mean, there's things like Slack for communications and management and document management and that type of thing. But also just that collaboration. I think that's here to stay. And, I think culture is extremely important, and that person-to-person relation is really important. But I think we're all going to just have to get used to how this new world is going. It's going to just be here to stay, and I don't see it necessarily changing. It's a lot of opportunity for really kind of sharpening, your overhead costs and that type of thing as well, which is I think a great opportunity. But but this electronic, this remote kind of environment we're living in, it's here now. I mean, COVID forced it on us. The technology, has been there for years. Well, for 7 or 8 years anyway, pre-COVID. But COVID has forced this, and we've all kind of adjusted to our worlds in Zoom, and getting to know each other this way. It's a little strange, a little harsh. I totally agree with what Joe is saying. I think, though, that firms are going to need to make an effort once a quarter or once a month or whatever that is to have those one-on-one or those group-on-group in-person type of meetings. So they're going to have to, where all that kind of used to happen just kind of naturally during the course of the day or the week or whatever it is, now it's going to have to be considered and planned and thought through, and content will have to be created around that as well. So, but this is here to stay.
Yeah. No,
people I talk to in New York, their companies, not in search, but their companies are getting rid of square footage like crazy. They're just releasing square footage. So.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we ourselves grew a lot during COVID times, and we're not alone. Lots of our clients in the search industry did the same. And I think the positive thing from that is that search firms had to pay more attention to culture, and looking after their people working from home, which for many firms was the first time. I know some firms have had hybrid models or working from home models for a long time, but not many actually.
Yeah.
And our industry's been less flexible, rightly or wrongly, than most. And I think I've seen lots of firms defining their culture better than before, and but not only that, the reality of looking after their people better. It's reassuring to see more firms in the sort of top employer lists in the Sunday Times, with something which our sector rarely got accolades for. But I think that's encouraging. But I do think it's difficult managing people working from home, and I think there are lots of challenges that we're seeing with that, and I think getting the balance right with the with different people having sort of different perspectives on that is quite difficult. But it seems to be that having a clearly defined culture is more important, therefore, in terms of the way you attract people and attracting the right people to fit in with your model. I think that's becoming more important.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, the brand in a way becomes even more important now, because you have to articulate what the brand strategy is, which is the culture part of, you know, culture is a component of brand strategy as well. But that articulation, the mission, vision, values, the personality of the organization, all of that needs to be documented and articulated and then inculcated across the remote workforce, right? So that everybody can be on the same page. It's even perhaps more important now in a remote environment than it was previously.
Yeah, so we've had a really good question in the chat here, and there's a couple actually, so I'll get to them both. But the first one, and thanks everyone for asking the questions, and please keep doing that. I said in the chat to keep you can keep it anonymous. I think you can just directly message me if you wanted to keep it anonymous. Otherwise, your name does appear in the chat, so I didn't need to mislead anyone there. But somebody has asked. Somebody has said that they're seeing lots of their clients, fintechs, I presume that their clients, fintechs and emerging tech companies who have engineering teams reaching out to agencies that are not solely executive search firms. I think by that, I'm going to make a presumption, because I think by that, what this individual means is that potentially something that we've seen over the last few years is that the contingency world and the search world are coming closer together at that kind of lower end of the search market. I think that's what this individual's saying. So I don't know if Joe, you've seen any of that, about that kind of, you know, in the UK, it's probably the 100K to 150K salary levels in pounds. So I've just had that confirmed. That's exactly what the question means. So Joe, so that's what we're seeing. Are you seeing that in the US? I mean, we work in the US as well, but you do, you know, you work exclusively in the US and North America. Are you seeing that yourself in terms of agencies, so staffing firms, as you call them, crossing over with exec search firms, and clients, maybe kind of existing clients of a search firm starting to, you know, be a bit more price sensitive perhaps, and starting to look at staffing firms as well as alternatives?
Tim, I would say that you know, there's always been, if you will, a presence or a sweet spot for those kinds of firms in the United States. I don't hear retained search firms here talking about, you know, a new concerning threat from the competition of these firms. So it may not be as pronounced an impact. You know, certainly, you know, the focus here in the United States remains on talent. There are more job openings here in this country at all levels than there are people to fill them, and certainly, you know, retained search is very well positioned, despite some of the, you know, forecasts about what's coming for the U.S. economy. You know, most retained search firms continue today to do very well. Yeah, I'd say any new competition from lower ends of the market here, I would say aren't consistently registering as a concern for retained firms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Joe. Have you got any experience? I know you deal more on the strategy side, Gray, but have you got any experience of that or any insights at all?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I would almost see the opposite from the conversations we've been having. Yeah, you know, that the contingent firms are trying to think about, can they move up market somehow or another, right? Because there is so much work out there, that the opportunity, and that certainly seems true here in Europe. I think I read a jobs report on the UK yesterday or the day before. You know, it's the same situation the UK, there's far more job openings and there's people there to fill the jobs. So really that expansion, and it becomes a potential threat when the market changes, right? Because those hybrid, or those contingency firms that have become hybrid type firms, doing both retained work as well as contingent work, they become just another player in the mix, right? So that differentiation will be really important, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the questioner was actually saying that. I think I'd sort of slightly misinterpreted that agency staffing firms are starting to, which is what you're saying, starting to offer retained solutions as well. I think the worlds are coming closer together in that sense, and we've certainly sort of seen that. I think it's to do with in-house capabilities. Whatever you think of in-house capabilities, and they do vary from country to country, and obviously from sector to sector and firm to firm. But in-house executive search, proper in-house executive search, is on the rise, and we know that they don't always do it very well, and all of the search industry would say that. But they have got some better caliber people than they used to have 5 years ago, and I guess search firms and staffing firms are having to compete more against in-house and having to offer different solutions, which we've covered. And I guess there's more appetite out there. There's more opportunities out there. So I think, staffing firms, or contingency firms, as we call them in Europe, are starting to look at retained solutions. And actually, we've seen some search firms setting up contingency brands, or separately to their search brands, and seeing opportunities. And that's, on our previous webinars to do with mergers and acquisitions, we're seeing a lot of appetite between contingency firms, staffing firms, as they're called in the US, and search firms. So I think that's an interesting trend as well.
His follow-on to it is interesting in the chat about the tech industry at all levels is moving to entirely retained, and that's interesting because it's so hard to attract talent at all levels, that having that retained focus, that consultative focus, where you really dig into an organization and the culture of an organization to fill at any level, it's interesting that's what he's seeing. That retained is kind of going across the total spectrum.
Well, I would say that I think an influence there is that retained firms are known to have reputations and proprietary databases, and they know people. Exactly. And so a call on behalf of a client from a retained search firm might very well be distinguished from any of the myriad other job opportunities that candidate might be aware of. So frankly, I think there's the value add of the reputation building, the networking that a retained search firm brings, because let's face it, many highly qualified candidates out there have lots of options these days. And if you can put a special spin, if you will, in the hands of a highly reputable retained search firm, that could really be a win for the client in a way that they can't get with their own internal search team.
And save the client money in the long run as well. So time is money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. So we've had another great question. So we're having a huge challenge in recruiting for ourselves from researcher to partner level to meet client demand. I've been told so many times of late about buyback bonuses, huge signing on bonuses being thrown around. Are there any firms that you're aware of that are doing anything different, innovative when it comes to hiring? I mean, what I would say to that, and then I'll pass it over to Joe. What I would say to that is, yes, we're seeing a lot because firms are really having to compete against others to hire the right people. I think 3 years ago, even just before COVID, a partner, I'll talk about researchers maybe in a minute because it's slightly different, but a partner would be, their priorities would be, do I like the guy, often a guy or woman, but often male still in this industry. But do I like the person that I'm reporting to? Do I get on with them? Is the money right? Base and bonus, and is the location right? Well, the location's has often become less of a factor now. The liking the person it's much more, I would say, much more thought through than that now. So back to culture, I think, partners who we're finding for our search firm clients are asking about the culture and how well the leadership is articulating the culture and following through on the culture. Not just, oh yes, we've got a collaborative culture, which every single search firm says.
We have a wonderful culture.
It's wonderful. We're really different. I'm having these calls all the time, but I had a call with a CEO last week of quite a big, a mid-size 100-person search firm. And that person was telling me how different their culture was. In the space of an hour, they didn't define the culture at all. So I think defining the culture is really, really important. So we're to answer that question as best I can. I think defining, having a brand and having a strategy, having a business strategy, having plans for the future, having an exit plan is becoming more and more important. So we know that some search firm leaders don't believe in trying to create value to exit because it can be painful and can be difficult, and there's been lots of mistakes made in the past. But we are seeing a lot more activity on the M&A side, and we're involved in quite a lot of transactions. We're having probably 5 conversations a week about M&A at the moment, and there definitely will be more transactions because it is possible. I'm not saying that everyone should do it, but partner level people are looking for equity, for financial gain, but also it's more about seeing that there's a clear focus. So it might not necessarily be an exit, but it's either some kind of event or some kind of goal and strategy. And partners are asking me and us about, what's the ESG strategy, what's the DEI strategy, not just externally, because lots of search firms are shouting about that, but internally too. So I think defining the brand, culture, values is becoming more important. And just lastly, on the financial side, the questioner is absolutely right. Yes, some firms are throwing money at people, and I think it's supply and demand. You do have to some degree. I think in this economy of the last 2 years, it has become increasingly competitive. That may change, but I don't know, Joe, if you've got any views.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can tell you about a live case study right now. I'm working with a New York firm to recruit an individual to their team, and they've taken we've taken 4, I guess, new approaches to messaging and branding the opportunity. Number 1 is a higher base salary aligned to the search market of today, not just the owner or founder's view of maybe what it should be to attract somebody, but what people can actually get in the market. So a higher base salary to start from. Second is the introduction just recently of a quarterly bonus as opposed to an annual bonus. Feeling there that it's a more recurring, more regular, more ever-present reinforcement of the firm's belief in that individual, that team member. Another one I can tell you is remote work. An individual who is not going to be tied to an office 5 days a week, start with 1 day a week remote, and then maybe graduate up to 2 or 3 eventually with good performance. And the other piece of the messaging that's sort of new and different for this particular client is articulating the growth path for this new individual. Where could they go? How does this role that I'm recruiting for springboard into the growth of the firm and a next position in the firm? So there's a bit more focus there. And then from the candidate side, let me just share this. Something that I'm seeing and hearing more frequently is deliberation on the part of candidates about who are the people I'm joining? What's the makeup of the team? And they're looking at, literally search firm websites to determine, okay, can I see myself fitting in with this team? Would there be other people with a similar amount of experience as myself on that team, people I can relate to? who would be my peers, who would be my boss, who would be contemporaries, if you will, in the firm, or am I going to look independently as a new add to that firm, very much dislike all the other members of the team? So there's really more, I find, consideration on the part of candidates now. They can be choosy not only about the culture, the values that hold people together, but literally the face of the firm. What does this firm care about? Who are they? And can I see myself fitting in with them? These are some of the initial judgments made by candidates for search firms.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I think that fitting in with them, I mean, we've seen processes taking longer because the potential partner, the candidate, if you like, is wanting to really check out the potential employer more thoroughly. But we're also seeing it the other way around, because it's sensible, back to the cultural point, to really know that company rather than just meeting the two people that you're going to be reporting into. So I think this is something we can give advice to you on as well, when we've got more time on a one-to-one basis. But we're seeing whole businesses, if there's still 20 people, literally all of those 20 people meeting, maybe kind of in an informal way towards the end of the process, but really being really thorough and making sure the process is two-way. And I've got lots more to say on this, but we're limited for time. Another change we're seeing is increased, and this is in the US as well as Europe, but more so in Europe, benefits becoming more prevalent, because those softer benefits, even if they're not big financial benefits, such as holiday allowance, increasing. We're seeing unlimited holiday featuring with a few firms now, which I think, going back to culture, is it's a tangible sign of trust. I'm not saying all firms should do that, but it's quite interesting what we're seeing there. Had another question, and we've got to end soon, but another question asking about, are we seeing search firms prioritize hiring fee earners to combat a potential downturn? And yes, we are starting to see that. ALC Enable, we are. I think we're dealing with a few very small businesses, 1-2 person businesses, or 1 or 2 partners rather, and they're looking for additional partners. But we're seeing that with larger businesses too. That's the short answer. And then I'll pass this back to Joe and Gray, but just to look at another question at the same time. Have the bonus schemes changed since the pandemic to attract new hires? So I don't know if I can pass both of those to you, Joe, if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, let me tackle this last question here. Yes, I would say the size of bonus and the frequency, as I mentioned, have indeed changed, and I'm coming to the view that the quarterly bonus across the firm, for firms that do that, and I have clients that bonus everybody in the firm, that the quarterly, to me, is emerging as a best practice in retained search. But the size of bonuses as well has reflected the success of firms and the growth of firms in recent years. So it's been good times. It's that personal touch and connection beyond the bonus that's going to, in part, determine whether you can retain that person and convince them that everything they bring, beyond just their ability to get a search closed and to open up a new search, it's that feeling of belonging, career development, reward, camaraderie, friendship, and support that really is all now weighing into their consideration of how they want to spend the rest of their careers.
And I would think work-life balance is a big one. I mean, the commitment to work-life balance, that's not just, flat, talk, right? Real commitment to that. And that's across industries, of course, but certainly in professional services.
Gray, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to in the last couple of years. I might speak to them on a Friday or a Thursday, and they're referring to the work they've got to get done on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
There are unfortunately a fair number of people in this business who are really burned out. Now, maybe they're still able to keep going forward, but there are a lot of burned out people right now in this business. And so again, I think just taking a pause with the team, I think, is a good idea. A pause or slowdown might be forced upon all of us in the business in the coming months with the global economic dynamics. But people do need a breather.
I think we're hearing that across the board. Everybody is just they're just, I was going to say something that would be really wrong, but they're just really going full at it, and that you can't. That's just not sustainable, right? So having a work-life balance kind of a strategy and approach, I think, will be critical in terms of retention and health. So
and wellness, which is becoming a big topic for the world, but it is even encroaching the search industry, and I think rightly so, because I think there's been a tendency just to speed up for the reasons that we've explained, but also because of Zoom and Teams and video. It's like we can fit more in our day, and there has to be a balance there.
And we're starting a whole wellness thing within ALC Enable as well, and supported clients in terms of how do you do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it's really, really important to look at that, and that obviously feeds into defining the culture. And looking at that, in relation to the hybrid model as well,
and the brand,
I mean, so just lastly, Gray, we've only got a couple of minutes. We didn't have much of a time to speak about brand strategy in relation to future proofing. But is there anything that you want to say to end on relating to that?
Well, I'm a big guru on brand, of course, as you know, but I just think it's a business imperative. You have to spend the time, and a lot of people think it's a little bit of navel gazing, which in some ways it is, but you have to spend the time really looking inside and figuring out what is it that is different about how we go to market, about our culture, about our expertise, the subject matter insights and knowledge that we have, that we then can put down on paper and articulate clearly, and then get everybody on the team on that same page, so that the story kind of snowballs and people can say it off the top of their heads as to what that story is. But critically important to that is not just the brand. I said go to market a minute ago. It's how do you package that brand and push it out into the market through social media, through LinkedIn, through media relations, through all sorts of marketing channels, right? To do that, to build that familiarity, and critically important to build that favorability, so that you are top of mind when there's a need at the end of the day.
Thanks, Gray. I know you've got lots more to say on that.
I can talk for a while on that.
Yeah, no, and I think we all have got lots more to say. So I want to just thank you to the audience for asking such great questions and making it really interactive and fun. We've got lots more to tell you. So if you've got any questions that you want to just fire to us directly, please do so. You've got our details. We'll be sending a follow-up after this anyway, but we will also be sending the video link if you want to share it with any of your contacts or any of your colleagues or ex-colleagues, and it will be also posted on YouTube. So we'll send you the link for that. I just want to say thank you to the audience for showing up in these very busy times, and thanks for your support, and thank you, Joe, very much for participating, and thanks to Gray, and looking forward to seeing you at the next one. We're probably doing about one webinar per month on a number of subjects, and we're just about to release our podcast series as well, with the first one being on that subject of wellness, and the next one after that will be on future proofing. So we've got lots of digestible material coming out over the next few weeks and months, and happy to help if anyone's got any questions. And thank you again to everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.